And I was there, and then I was not. I was standing on kind of a little stage.
Hi, my name is Natalie Sudman. I am an artist, a writer, and I spent many years working as an archaeologist before embarking on an unexpected journey that would change the course of my life forever. For most of my career as an archaeologist, I was deeply immersed in the study of human history, often connecting with ancient cultures and their mysteries. After working for many years in the field, I felt a pull for something different, something new. I began looking for work overseas, but despite my efforts, securing a job in another country proved difficult. It was then, almost by chance, that I found myself volunteering for Hurricane Katrina cleanup efforts in Mississippi and Louisiana. It was during that time that I crossed paths with some individuals who offered me an opportunity that I couldn't have anticipated. A job working in Iraq on reconstruction projects for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Without fully knowing what awaited me, I agreed, and in 2006 I was deployed to Iraq. Life in Iraq and the unexpected in Iraq, I found myself working on a wide range of reconstruction projects, from building roads to restoring water treatment plants. My role evolved from a construction representative to project manager, and I became accustomed to life in a war-torn country. There was always a sense of danger, but it was part of the job. Most of the time, we would travel in convoys of up-armored vehicles. On one particular day, after a long stretch of visiting construction sites, we were heading back. I was in the front vehicle with one other colleague, while two colleagues followed in the vehicle behind us. A truck led the way, and a gun truck brought up the rear. As we traveled, we were hit by an improvised explosive device, IED, that detonated beneath our vehicle. In that split second, I was in a state of exhaustion, my arm resting on the armrest and my eyes closed. I was drifting in a kind of half-sleep when suddenly everything changed. I remember being there and then not being there. In the blink of an eye, I found myself standing on what felt like a small stage surrounded by thousands of beings. The moment I arrived, I knew exactly where I was and what I was doing. There was no confusion or disorientation. I understood that I was not alone. Far from it. I was surrounded by these beings, each one radiating an energy that was both familiar and strange. They were made of light, but they had human forms, and though I couldn't directly communicate with them through words, I felt the transfer of information happening telepathically. The transfer of information, the experience of exchanging information with these beings was unlike anything I had ever experienced. The communication wasn't verbal, nor was it typical telepathy as we might understand it. The information transferred was conceptual, not spoken or thought in words, but in complete, multi-dimensional chunks. I knew that I was providing them with information from my experiences, from my own understanding of the world, and they were taking it in, assimilating it. In this space, I became aware that cultures have their own energy signatures. These flows of energy represent the collective spirit, history, and essence of a society, and within those flows are patterns and relationships that transcend time. My mind began to process the deep understanding of how cultural energies interact, how different societies influence one another, and the unseen threads that connect us all. The information I was providing to the beings around me was broad and far-reaching, covering everything from macro-level cultural dynamics to the intricate, individual interactions between people. It wasn't necessarily information that was important to human life in a practical sense, but to the beings around me, it was essential. Even though the beings were made of light, their forms were human-like, though I later realized that this was probably a human overlay on my memory, a comfort or reference point that made the experience less intimidating. In reality, the beings were not human, but my mind translated them into something more familiar. I tried to alter their forms afterward, experimenting with changing them into monsters or animals, but this wasn't possible. In certain parts of my experience, when I tried to change the appearance of the beings, I found that I couldn't, which suggested that those particular memories were truthful representations of what I had encountered. These were not creations of my mind, but genuine, unchangeable experiences. The deep rest environment is. I continued standing before these beings. I felt a kind of transition, not in the physical sense, but a shifting of perspective. It was as if I blinked and in an instant found myself in an entirely different environment. This new place was velvety black, infinite and serene. It felt warm and deeply relaxing, and I felt at peace. There was no form to me here, no physical body. I was simply an organization of energy, existing as part of the vast, still space around me. I was not alone. Two beings accompanied me, though. Our interaction was not one of direct communication. Instead, they were like mechanics, tending to my energy, tuning it, ensuring that I was aligned and well. It was during this time that I realized I was experiencing something akin to a life review. This life review was different from the one I had heard about from other people who had undergone near-death experiences. I wasn't revisiting past moments of intense emotion or reliving my past in a detailed and linear fashion. Instead, I found myself looking for the moments in my life when unexpected outcomes arose from my decisions, actions, and choices. I was particularly intrigued by these instances, not from a place of regret, but because they held valuable lessons and insights. I also noticed that I found immense joy in activities that engaged my skills and talents, even when they were challenging. For example, creating art or writing, though not always easy, was something I derived great satisfaction from because it engaged me completely. It wasn't about the end result, but about the process of engaging with something I loved, something that stirred me. The absence of fears. I continued this introspective journey. I moved further into a state of deep rest. It was as if I had gone so deep within myself that I was turned inside out. In this space, there was no distinction between me and the infinite space I had felt earlier. The space was both within and outside of me. There was no time, no space, no beginning or end. In this place, there was no fear. I was not afraid of what I might face upon returning to my body. There was no anxiety about what the future held, no worry about the physical injuries I might have sustained. Instead, I was curious. I wondered about the future with a sense of intrigue, not fear. The healing environment. Eventually, I blinked again and found myself in what I call the healing environment. This place was where I could see the aftermath of the explosion. I saw the blown-up truck in the desert, the damage, and the four of us who had been in the vehicle. I could perceive each of us not only as physical beings but as organizations of energy. The entire scene, the explosion, and the resulting chaos were also energy patterns. I was with two other beings in this space. One of them felt like an old friend. someone I had known deeply on a spiritual level. We had a strong connection, not from a physical life, but from a deeper, timeless level. This friend and I were engaged in the process of determining how my injuries would unfold. We experimented with different injuries, looking at how each choice would affect my life moving forward. In this space, there was no fear or hesitation. We laughed as we played with the potential injuries I might sustain. From this perspective, a human lifetime seemed like a brief moment, and even the most painful experiences were seen as temporary. We experimented with injuries like inserting shrapnel into my brain or severing my arm, but we did so with the understanding that these experiences were simply part of the human experience, not something to be feared. We saw them as opportunities for growth, understanding, and learning, much like a movie in which the characters are not truly hurt, even though they may be shown in painful situations. Eventually, we selected the injuries that would best serve the purpose I had agreed to before my physical incarnation. When this process was complete, I blinked back to the gathering of beings where I had first been, to discuss my decision in greater detail. This time, the conversation was not about cultural or energetic flows, but about my personal journey, my individual purpose. I cannot fully describe the specifics of what was discussed, as it remains a deeply personal part of my experience. But what I can say is that it was not a matter of hierarchical importance. In the larger reality, there is no judgment or comparison between one person's life and another's. Everything is of equal value, whether you are a business owner or a homeless person, whether you are creating art or just living quietly. Back to the physical world. After discussing my decision with the beings, I blinked again and found myself back on the desert, standing beside the wreckage of the truck. Time seemed to have stopped. I was in between moments, existing outside of time. With a few other beings, we discussed my decision again, this time from a perspective closer to the human experience. This was more about the practicalities, the details of how my life would unfold from here. When this conversation was finished, I blinked once more, and I heard a pop as I returned to my physical body. I opened my eyes to the reality of the situation. The truck had stopped, the convoy was in place, and the explosion had left its mark. But despite the severity of the injuries I had sustained, there was no fear. I was no longer concerned about what the future might hold. I had faced my injuries with curiosity rather than fear. I knew that I had chosen these injuries for a reason, and I was not angry or bitter about the experience. I accepted it as part of my journey, part of the process that would allow me to learn, grow, and eventually find deeper meaning. Reflections on the experience in the days and months that followed. As I recovered physically and emotionally, I continued to reflect on the insights I had gained during my time outside the physical world. The experience helped me approach my injuries with a sense of acceptance, understanding that they were part of a larger plan. I didn't need to remember every detail of why I had chosen these injuries or how they would serve my purpose. What mattered was the trust that I had in myself and in the process, the knowledge that these injuries had value, that they were opportunities, helped me navigate the difficult road to recovery with a sense of peace. Ultimately, the experience taught me that there is no hierarchy to human lives, no comparison between one person's journey and another's. All experiences have value, and the lessons we learn along the way shape us into who we are meant to be. I learned to embrace life, not by avoiding the challenges or the pain, but by accepting them as part of the larger, intricate dance of existence.